Hey, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. Welcome to this episode of Everest Group's GBS Conversation with Leaders. We have a very good panel today joining us from across the globe. We have Deborah Cobbs. Deborah Cobbs is most popular and most informed person in the GBS community globally. She is principal for sourcing change and advises Everest Group in our GBS initiatives. Welcome, Deborah. She is joining
Thank you.
from DC area. We have Puneet Uppal joining us from Bangalore. Puneet is currently head of global business operations for Diageo and has been in the CPG community for a long time with Mondelez and GE before that. We also have Sue Breuer. Sue is dialing in from Jersey today. She's traveling, so thanks for making time, Sue. She's heading operations and enablement for Kenview's EBS. And Sue, tell us a little more about it when you talk about your experience. And we have Shivi Pandey, who is practice director with Everest Group, joining in from Gurgaon, who looks into our CPG and retail research. I'm dialing in from London. I'm a partner with Everest Group and focus on our GBS research. Do tell us in comments where are you dialing in from. Will be good to hear that as well. Uh, to kick us off, we have a really special topic we want to talk about today, and really glad that we have such a experienced panel to talk about this. But the GBS model in the last 3 decades has really evolved to become cornerstone of how global companies work in today's world. And what the CPG industry and the retail industries have been very aggressive adopters of the model. And we have seen a lot of growth in new adoption and expansion of the model in the last several years. Earlier this year, Everest Group embarked on an extensive study, and we analyzed about 35 leading companies in this industry on how they operate within this model. Where are they growing? What are the strengths and weaknesses? This was a very diverse pool, about two-thirds from CPG, a little more than one-third from retail industry, varying in the size of these companies, many of them larger than 50 billion in annual revenue, but also a lot of them in different scale of operations. A healthy mix of North American as well as Western European, UK headquartered companies, and different operating models as well. Many of them in a captive model, many of them in a hybrid, where they have both the captive and outsourcing relationship. So, a good mix of companies that we analyzed. Thanks to all of those companies for participating in this research. As you are representing either a CPG or a retail firm today, do tell us through comments of what kind of organization are you representing. And I would invite now my colleague Shivi to share findings from this research. And as you go through, do use the comments option to share your observations, reactions, and also ask questions to our panel today. Shivi, tell us what you learned.
Thank you for setting the context, Rohit. Moving on to the exciting part of our presentation, wherein we talk about the key findings from our report. So these are the top 5 findings from our report. Starting with the first one, our survey suggests that there is definitely an Atlantic divide. We have a 50-50% split between Western Europe and UK based GBS organization and that of North America. And what we have learned is that there's a clear distinction in the perception. So, for instance, the North American counterparts, most of the GBS organization, they are viewed as a pillar to drive enterprise transformation, while that view is different for our Western and UK-based GBS organization, where GBS is viewed as a value add beyond cost. Moving on to our second finding, alignment to the business is variable. So while our survey suggests that most of the GBS organization they organize their business by geography, we also see for early adopters and still evolving GBS organizations, they align by line of business or by product line, implying that the need to stay closer to the business is really critical. Moving on to our third finding, process improvement still remains the holy grail. So most of our survey respondents they reported that they are still prioritizing driving efficiency and effectiveness in operations over other factors. So when they were probed into and asked what are the future priority areas, most of the respondents, they chose digitization and automation as being the top priorities, signaling that the GBS imperative for service delivery excellence still remains. Our fourth finding is on location, the location strategy remaining unchanged. So most of our respondents, they are doubling down on their efforts in our traditional locations, India and Eastern Europe. The challenge for talent, it's still remains a serious concern. And as our respondents are trying to uh, rebalance their locations portfolio, they are now looking at another other locations in Latin America and APAC to diversify. Our fifth and most interesting finding is on outsourcing and how there's a clear shift from outsourcing to insourcing. So, as our respondents are trying to evolve their business models, they are taking more work in house, and while doing that, they are strategically using their outsourcing partners for very specific goals and agenda. Next, I wanted to talk about some data that further supports our findings that we just discussed. So on the very next slide, so our survey explored the GBS adoption trend by enterprise size and age of GBS. These are our top three findings. The first one being revenue matters. So we saw positive correlation between the revenue of the parent housing the GBS and the propensity to adopt a hybrid model. That's a mix of insourcing and outsourcing. Our second key finding, age impacts model adoption. So we see that as the GBS organization ages, they are more likely to opt for an hybrid model. So for you will see that for organizations currently in 1 to 3 years of age, the share of captive is 43%. But as they move and become fully operational, this share reduces to 25%. Our third key finding is larger the enterprise, the greater is the scope of the GBS. So for organizations with 2 to 10 billion of revenue, they typically support three functions being finance and accounting, source to pay, and data analytics. And we saw that as the size increases, as the revenue increases to more than 50 billion, the functions that they support increases to 8. Moving on. We additionally looked at the perception of GBS value based on their parents' company revenue, location, and geographic reach of the GBS organization. Our very first finding, the more value is ascribed to GBS within larger enterprises. So for GBS that are parent that are earning more than $50 billion, we saw that 60% of them reported that their enterprise view them as a pillar of transformation, while for those earning less than 50 billion, the number was 25%. Moving on to our second finding, the Atlantic divide. We already discussed that previously. I'll summarize this with how we also explored how these GBS organizations are navigating the current landscape, what are the key challenges they are facing today, and what are the key focus area for them to combat these challenges. So, when asked about the key challenges, the top three challenges that our GBS organizations are facing today is the digitization of GBS operations, institutionalizing the GBS model in enterprise operating model, and investment in innovation. And when they were probed to tell how they are combating or going about these challenges, these three focus area came to light. The first one being automation and digitization of processes, second, enhancing operational efficiency and effectiveness, and the third one being improving customer experience and satisfaction. With this, I would like to wrap the presentation and pass on the stage to Rohit to talk more about the report.
Hey, thanks, Shivi. I think you covered all the aspects. I would only like to offer all our listeners today, and I can see a lot of them comments pouring in from all over US mainly, actually. So if you are joining from US, welcome. If you are joining from other locations, do let us know. And I would like to offer to make a request to get a copy of the report as it gets published in a few days from now. And you will see a link in the chat to be able to make that request and leave us your contact details. With that, Deborah, I'll request you to take us through the rest of the discussion.
All right. Well, we obviously have a dog that's very excited about this LinkedIn Live today. Thank you, Rohit and Shivi. The nicest thing about LinkedIn Live is that we can be a little bit informal. It's my privilege today to have chatting with me the head of GBS for the leading producer of spirits in the world, and as his antidote, Sue Brower, who is responsible for capabilities for one of the leading producers of analgesics, so we can drink and then get our hangover all taken care of. Thank you both for joining me today, and apologies for the very, very corny intro.
Thanks,
a lot
Deborah.
of things to unpack in the report. 34 companies talked about what they have in their GBS, how their organizations look at value, their models, whether they deliver capabilities to the rest of the enterprise. So we have a fairly good view of the current state of CPG and retail GBS. You know, one of the things that strikes me is that when you look at some of the organizations that are most mature, they happen to be particularly in CPG. Why? Were they early adopters? Why do we see some of the brands that we most admire in GBS space seem to come from this space? Either of you have any comment on that?
So I'll just start real quick. I think that the reason that CPG is very quick to adopt a GBS model is because they have a smaller profit margin, right? They really need to make the most of their dollars. And in order to do that, the GBS model is very important to the organization. When they centralize and then make very efficient the behind the scenes model, they can then spend a lot more on the selling and the marketing and the things that they need to do to keep their products profit share as high as it can be.
Puneet, you've been hanging around GBS organizations most of your career, certainly some of the leading brands. And you've been an early adopter. What's your view? Anything else beyond profit margin?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and that definitely Sue's point is absolutely spot on. But I think there is another reason for it, and we've all experienced this in our lives, especially through COVID. The speed of commerce has increased. It's gone more digital. The expectation, therefore, of the physical delivery of goods, whether it is to a customer in a store or whether it is the consumer direct through an e-commerce channel, that timeline has crashed. The experience needs to be faster, slick, cheaper, all of those things, right? And in my mind, it is to keep up with that pace at which the consumer demands your products, that GBSs and therefore the operating environments in these companies have had no choice but to reinvent themselves at a faster pace than some of the other industries maybe. I'm not saying other industries don't have that pressure. A lot of industries do. But I think that is a key driver for innovation as well. It's the necessity to keep the share of the wallet. You got to be there. I can let me think of it the other way, right? Banking, the physical delivery, the only physical delivery a bank can do is cash at the ATM. That experience hasn't changed in the last 30 years, right? You go to the machine, you still put in your card, you still put in your PIN, and you take the cash and you walk away from the same boring looking machine. They've changed the lights and made it fancy with some cameras, but the experience has not changed. You got to go through those 3 steps to get it done. And it still takes the same amount of time to get the cash out. So I think that's a big difference, isn't it? Also from a CPG, especially when you talk of brands like ours, I think it's very relevant.
And what are, there are particular challenges in establishing a GBS, growing a GBS, helping a GBS succeed in any industry. But what have the two of you seen in terms of the very special challenges in setting up and operating in growing a GBS organization in CPG retail?
So I think I've got a kind of unique opinion on that at the moment. So most people probably don't know what Kenvue is.
It's your chance.
So Kenvue is the consumer spinoff from J&J Consumer. So we're all of the old J&J Consumer brands, from Johnson's Baby to Zyrtec, which you can see behind me, to Tylenol, which is what people use after they drink Puneet's alcohol.
After they pay money to Puneet's company. Right?
Yes, they come right to us after they're finished. But anyway, what we're going through right now is a little bit unique, because we are standing up a GBS from the beginning in an already existing company. We're brand new. We IPO'd 6 months ago, but it is really a brand new company. And the issues that we're having is the ability to stay on top of that innovation and that fast moving network that Puneet was talking about, at the same time as we are building our GBS. So a lot of the times when people start building a GBS, they go a little bit slower, they take their time, they come together with what they want to do. In our circumstance right now, we on one hand have to help actually operationalize a TSA'd GBS at the same time we're building a new one. And we can't keep up with the demand, because there's so much demand to bring things into the GBS. It's really difficult for us to do that while we're actually building at the same time.
So basically you're driving and changing the wheels at the same time. But I think more broadly, let's step back from both of your individual situations. What are some of the challenges that you see? I see one challenge, I'll kick it off, is that, let's face it, you work for companies that produce stuff, but fundamentally you work for companies that create brands.
Exactly.
I'm not a drinker, Puneet. I got to tell you that. But your former company, if I remember, had something called an Oreo. And when I was a really good girl, I got Oreos. So I'm very fond of that brand. But those are brands. Those are experiences. You may be selling, consumer health and comestibles, but fundamentally your brands. And one of the challenges I've seen in this market is that GBS organizations have a particular challenge because you've got a customer base. The business is so hyper-focused on brand that they think that even paying a bill, conceivably, might impact their brands. What's your view of why this is so very special?
It is, Deborah. This is exactly what I would have said. You summed it up pretty well. When I joined Diageo, right? The CEO at the time, Ivan, he told me, Puneet, we are brand builders. If somebody asks us, what do you do at Diageo? Our response is, we are brand builders, right? There's a very strong association with these 200-year-old brands. We just launched Johnny Walker again for the next 200 years, right after the first 200. So there is a lot of history. There is a lot of value system attached. There's a lot of culture, a lot of history. Generations of families have done nothing but serve these brands, right? And now, if you go to the GBS of the world, with everything that we described, with more work moving to GBS, more and more customer, direct customer, consumer, business partner interaction is beginning to happen. And unless these employees and our focus on talent engagement is high, so that they stay connected to the promise of the brand, that's your breakpoint. That's your breakpoint right there. Just saying, my on-time in full metric is 95% ain't gonna help. It's a number, right? So you're absolutely right. I think that's the big challenge. How do we keep our multitude of thousands of employees engaged with the brand, engaged with the purpose of the company? Why are we here? That's important. And it takes time, it takes effort, especially with that 10, 15, 20% attrition, depending on the time of the year and the year of the decade, right? These numbers fluctuate. It becomes even more difficult to keep up with that. And that's where the focus on talent, therefore, should never be sort of underestimated.
Never drop the ball there. One of the things you think about, the implications of COVID on CPG and retail, and certainly one of the most pronounced implications was on your supply chains. And one of the findings in the report is that increasingly GBS organizations are getting involved in the management of supply chain processes. Mm-hmm. Maybe not end to end yet, but increasingly supply chain is, in our data, is something that GBSs are delivering to. And anecdotally, you go to any conference and there's conversation about supply chain. How do you see particular challenges in managing the supply chain in a CPG retail company, if any? Maybe there aren't any.
Oh, I can go first this time. I think if you look at the scope of GBS, at least in Diageo or in several other companies, in fact, it starts right from it actually plays all the way through, all the way from financials and doing your costing of products, costing of the supply chain, costing of the distribution of networks within finance or FP&A world, right? From there, you move on to the whole order to cash cycle. That whole order to cash cycle is all fed by the demand signals and the supply signals. What is your inventory available to commit at the time of even taking an order from a customer, right? That's a supply chain question. To going to order management, where is the visualization of the inventory? The distributor wants to know when will the truck reach, right? Where is the visualization for that? That's a supply chain question, right? In our case, a lot of the times we have to allocate inventory. We cannot always meet 100% of the demand for the aged liquid, at least on the single malt side in our business, right? So then you got to, again, it's a supply chain question. What is available to what market and what should I promise to which customer at which airport when it comes to duty free and global trade? All of these are supply chain questions. And whether you talk of order to cash, you talk of finance, you talk of even supplier management, or you talk of information management, customer service, these are live questions. These are the questions my teams get in GBO. They're all supply chain questions.
Yeah, and I think it goes to the
absolutely.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it goes to the very basics of that. GBS is known for process, for doing processes well, and to be able to do them repeatedly. When you talk supply chain, where else is it more important that you consistently do the process right and get the right result? Like you said, we're brand companies. And when you don't have your brand on the shelves for the consumer, you haven't done something right? And that's going to impact the brand. So I would think it just makes sense, because GBS is known for being able to look at a process, to detangle a process, make it as efficient as process, and make it repeatable. So if we can do that, and if we can help supply chain by doing that and keeping their product on the shelf, we're inherently enhancing that brand name.
So let's, you mentioned earlier that you are responsible for a very challenging act, which is keep everything running. But at the same time, you have an opportunity, as Puneet did several years ago, to invent or reinvent the concept of GBS in your organization. You've got a bit of a clean slate. I mean, no one has a complete clean slate because someone was still paying the bills anyway. Mm-hmm. What are you doing differently? You've got a chance to invent right now. What you've been looking at the market, you can learn from everyone's mistakes, you can see what's working. What are you doing differently?
Deborah, it's exactly what you're talking about. I've been in a few different companies in their GBS organizations, and I've seen GBSs change over the years. But this is the very first time I've had a chance to take all of that learning that I've accumulated over the last 25 years and bring it to an organization who is really trying to do it right from the beginning. To your point, we're not just abandoning everything that J&J ever did. They do a lot of things right, but as a company matures, they make decisions, and then a year later they make a different decision, and then they make a different decision, and often they end up overcomplicating their processes. We have the chance with a $15 billion company to take it back to the basics, to go back to what will really make the GBS work, what will make us successful. And that's what we're doing differently. We're trying to adhere to the basic standards of what we should be doing, of not overcomplicating the process, not developing on top of existing apps that are out there on the market and have proved to be best in class. So we are really thinking about what can we take in, make it fit for purpose, yet keep it as simple and unencumbered as possible, so that we will be able to be agile, like everybody talks about. A lot of times over the years, companies get less and less agile. We are trying to make it and building that foundation with the purpose of being agile for the future and being able to adjust as the next thing comes down the road.
So less is more. So
yes.
Less is more. That's what you're trying. Puneet, you got to reboot a few years ago. What did you do differently?
I think we did several things at the time. The most difficult part was chain management, and the story was quite similar. Mondelez was breaking away from Kraft at the time, so it was very similar to what Sue is explaining, and therefore there was willingness in the company to go do something about it. So I think from that perspective, the story is pretty much similar. We used to joke around with the statement at the time saying, when we are going to evaluate the possible options and solutions this time, we're going to go with that mantra of no accountant left behind, right? So no, don't leave anything behind, put everything on the block, analyze everything. What are people spending time on, right? In today's time, technology has moved on, right? This what I just shared was like 10 years ago, but today technology has changed. I think the bigger opportunity today, if I was to do that again, is to first eliminate work, non-value add work where it is. It is very expensive to shift and train and do all the change behind it, right? Just get rid of the work. Nobody needs that work. Simplify your organization. And I think that's the biggest sort of thinking that we use then, and we are even using now at Diageo.
Well, Puneet, you've worked, talk about Mondelez, you're now working for a British company. One of the things that our report teased out is that there is, as Shivi said, there is an Atlantic divide, that the value ascribed to GBS is different on both sides of the pond. We're seeing Western European companies more, shall we say, more fond of a captive model versus an outsourced or a hybrid model. So we do see some subtle differences. And you could say that's because of the way they operate. You could talk about the way that European companies versus American companies look at their workforce. What have you seen? Do you believe there's an Atlantic? I guess someone's having a party here. Do you see?
I don't know. When I do this, the balloons start flying. I don't know why.
Well, why not? Do you see an Atlantic divide in your career? Has there been a difference in operating a GBS, designing a GBS, growing a GBS, one side of the Atlantic versus the other?
There is a difference, but I think the difference is more driven by three things. Scale. It is smaller in Europe per country. North America or US has that benefit. Language is a huge denominator of how things change and how solutions can be scaled up. And the third is the data regulation, data privacy regulation and related stuff, where Europe has always been a little bit ahead of the US. So I think it is those factors that have driven different choices out the gate. Eventually, I think they all catch up, but the start points could be different depending on what you're dealing with and what your scale and your start point is. But I think that's where it almost stops. Eventually, everybody has investors who want certain returns from the company, right? We all have shareholder commitments, and I think eventually everybody is going after this transformation space, at least in the CPG space, like I said at the start. The pace of commerce, the pace of business is fast. It's fast for everybody. In fact, I find some places in Europe where digitally the markets are ahead than what I've seen in the US. US is still sort of check-based, more sort of manual, more classical, versus what I see in Europe. I see much faster move to digitization. But that's been my experience, quite frankly, and it actually distills down to the leadership team and the exec that you're working with. I think every company has its own culture. I think that's where it matters more than sort of the Atlantic divide in my mind.
Okay, so context is everything.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got a question from a member of our audience. Thank you very much. It really is a question about operations versus innovation. And as you can see on the stream here, how much of GBS, and let's assume, I'm not sure if our questioner is asking whether you should be focusing on centralizing and standardizing versus creating new roles in the organization. And I know, Sue, one of the responsibilities in your remit is actually developing capabilities that can be extended to the rest of the enterprise. So comment from either of you on, business as usual, standardizing, run versus creating new capabilities to make the organization more agile.
Yeah, in my experience, you have to start by centralizing and standardizing. That's where you start the journey. You look at what's out there, you look at how it's done, and you find a way to do it a little bit more simpler, more standardized, so that you can scale for the organization. But that does cause there to end up being new roles within the GBS organization over time. If you start being just a doer, let's say, you look at that and you say, you know what, we've got a lot of data here that we've accumulated. And based on that data, we can do more reporting, we can do more analytics, we can focus more on helping the businesses make different decisions within their own businesses. And that then becomes a different type of support for each business because they have different types of decisions to make. But I think it's more of a progression as the GBS expands. And as you prove what you can do with what you have, that you're able to expand into those new roles of the data analytics and the reporting and decision making, as well as a number of other capabilities that you can then export back out to the business.
Mm-hmm. The only add I will make here, Sue and Deborah, is we think of GBS as a virtual model, right? Centralization, standardization is when you start thinking of masses of people and scale. Mostly, if I'm reading this question right, you won't have that if you're trying to build new capability. And therefore, what is more important there is for GBS to think of themselves as the orchestrator of events and capability with a network of individuals spread across the business. Sitting with the market, they could report into GBS, doesn't matter, so long as the capability is what the organization needs. I think if you answer that question, you will stay relevant. I don't care where people sit. 10% of my GBS is not in any location. People work from home across 30 different countries, and that's totally fine. We know exactly what they're doing. We know which market they're sitting in, why they're sitting, where they're sitting, and why they're doing what they're doing. And that's totally fine.
Well, some companies are requiring back to office, so you all are bucking the trend at Diageo right now.
No, we're not. No, we're not. It is interesting when you do the survey. Some people do want to come into the office because they miss the connection, right? Like we said at the start, promise of the brand, familiarity with the brand, understanding the brand, the value proposition, the purpose of the company, super critical. So for us, at least what we've done in Diageo, we have reason to come in. That's what we are focusing in. If there's a big program going on, there's a big workout happening, there's an exec visit happening, there's an in-person town hall happening, we're investing in a 3-day green belt training, we're investing in a 2-week black belt training. The trainer is there, come in, right? But otherwise, if you're going to just punch some transactions today and have a few Zoom calls, no need to bother yourselves.
Yes.
totally fine. So it's all work related, manager driven, work driven, and so far we are holding the peace.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those processes for a minute. I mean, one of the things that still absolutely flummoxes me, and the data in the report underscored this confusion. We've been at this, whether it's been single function shared service or GBS, for a long time now. We've been at this since mid 90s, and some folks would even argue first shared services organization was stood up in the late 80s, which seems like eons ago. Why are we still chasing the holy grail called process excellence? Why haven't we gotten there yet? I mean, looking at the data, there's a lot of concern about pushing the digital agenda, but we're pushing the digital agenda in great part to drive more efficient and effective processes. So why is it still a top priority for GBS? Why haven't we cracked it yet?
So you want to go first, then I'll go.
Sure. In my experience, it's not that we haven't cracked it, but we cracked it for a moment in time. Mm-hmm. So there's always, as we've talked about, there's always change. Change is happening now more than ever. It's happening more quickly than ever. So it's to stay on top of that change that we have to keep changing. And I think that's where you're going. I mean, going back to, Deborah, what you were talking about, in the 90s, the process efficiency was to have a bunch of AP folks. In my first company, they were sitting in New Jersey the first time we did a shared service center, right?
Well, that was consolidation.
Exactly. And that was the beginning. But things have come so far from there and have moved along so much. And even through COVID, I think things even picked up and have started changing more quickly. So it's to stay on top of those changes and to stay at the forefront of the technology that you have to keep changing. If at any point a GBS stops, they're going to be stale and behind the times in a matter of months.
Yeah. Deborah, for me, it is continuous improvement, and the key word there is continuous.
Yep.
It doesn't stop. It should not stop. It does not have to stop. If the technology doesn't change, that forces the agenda on you because you don't want to be left behind. The companies keep changing their models. There is M&A happening all the time. Systems are changing. S4s of the world come along, right? Because ECC is going out of fashion and support at the same time. What are you going to do? You got to rewrite your core processes. So I think this is all. This won't stop. It shouldn't stop.
All right. So we really should think about process improvement differently. We need to think about it as a continuum, not a once and done, because many of the folks we know who run organizations, particularly in CPG, think about, I'm going to improve my processes and then I can sit back and I can focus on capability or something else in the GBS agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there are thresholds that you must stay above. I get that. So, if you want to make a special effort, get there. But after that continuous improvement has to be there. Otherwise the law of entropy will set in. You leave something unattended, it'll start dropping. We started with physics, right? That's physics.
Well, before we went live, we talked about physics, and maybe GBS is just one of those metaphysical pursuits. One of the things in the research we identified is that there seems to be, and not just in Europe, where different employment regulations, data privacy, perhaps even a different view towards the relationship of employer to employee. We seem to see a trend back towards insourcing. And one of the things that we can talk about at some later time is, are certain processes coming back and forth. Why do you see that? I mean, you talk to any outsourcer and you look at their growth rates and they tell you that everybody's on the outsourcing bandwagon. But and notwithstanding the fact that our respondents are embracing a hybrid model, why do you see this trend or this rebalancing now?
I can think of two reasons. I think one we have already discussed in this call. We got to start thinking of one office, not front, middle, back office anymore. The speed of transactions, the speed of business, the speed of physical delivery of goods, supply chains is so fast. People sitting in GBSs are connected with everybody, all consumers, all customers, all suppliers, all business partners, all employees, if you're also running HR operations like we do, right? So if you have outsourced in that model, it is difficult to keep the partner employees engaged with your brand even more than it is your internal people, like we discussed earlier, right? So I think that could be one of the reasons why companies get jittery over a period of time. If they're not getting that value, if they're not getting that connection, they may be taking that decision. That would be one. The second one, I think, is maturity curve. When it is new, transformation is hard. You need scale. Send it to a partner. They are the experts. They do this for a living.
And they'll give you cost reduction, hopefully very quickly.
Once that lemon has been squeezed, things are better. Processes have improved. It's stable. You're not seeing much change or differentiation. Companies want to bring it back. The other reason companies also want to bring it back is capability. Once you send this work out, the capability within the organization starts going down. Suddenly an ECC to S4 comes along and you're looking around for your commercial and supplier and finance
And they're
experts.
not there.
There is no one.
Yeah.
There's no one. Everybody's gone. And companies are like, holy moly, this is not good. We got to keep some internal capability so that at least we know what we are buying or what we have to buy. I think these are some of the reasons why.
And what good is, and also what good is. We need to know that.
Yeah. So I think it is somewhere between those reasons. And the simplest mathematical reason can be, it is all cleaned up. I can bring it in-house. Why pay someone 15-20% profit margin on it?
You're going to make a lot of friends here, Puneet. Sue, your
But
point.
it is not cheap to bring in. Like I said, you got to have capability and management, right? So it's not like it's you can't replace that for nothing. You got to spend money.
Right. Any model shift costs money. I think we tend to forget that.
Yeah.
Sue, I mean,
I would just completely agree with what Puneet said. I think everything he said, I 100% agree with, and I've seen in action. Once it's out there, once you know what you're doing, it's just much easier to bring and grow inside. And I've seen many organizations fall into the trap of exactly what he said about you're going to do a major upgrade, and all of a sudden you don't have the subject matter expertise that has depth into the process that you need to be able to do that. And then you're contracting with the third party to do that. And that just, first of all, it just doesn't seem right. And second of all, it doesn't end up being as efficient as it could be. Because the other thing is, with the brand changes and everything we've been talking about, it is a lot easier to change your own employees overnight, to give them a new message and get them out there looking at a new brand or a new way of promoting a brand or a new attitude about something, a whole lot easier than it is to take another company's employees and do that. It can be
lost in translation is really one of the reasons that insourcing may be a good
and especially compounded by the fact that there is no process today that runs without an application. And a lot of outsourcing on the application and IT operations side also is hurting, because not only do you not know the wiring of your process, you also don't know the wiring of your system when time comes for that change. So you are totally in the dark, basically. And then you don't know what to do. And you can hire good, smart people from partners. Don't get me wrong. They have the best people because they do this for their business. This is their front office, right? But then where is the connection, and how long can you have them becomes an issue.
Rohit, we have time for one more provocation to the panel.
We do. We can take a couple of minutes, Deborah. Go ahead.
All right. Let's look at location. One of the things the study indicates is that we're really not breaking out. We are a pack of GBS leaders who basically move in a herd. We still like our Costa Ricas and our Polands and our different cities, particular cities in India, etc. You see any breakout in locations, or are we going to continue the locational orthodoxy that we've been following over the last couple of years?
I think I'd like to see a bit of a breakout, but I don't see it at this point. I think in the usual locations, we're getting a bit of saturation. So people are moving from company to company to company a lot more quickly, and thereby causing the wages to go up faster than I've seen in the past. So I'd like to do that, but honestly, it takes a brave individual to go out and find where else in the world you can get the appropriate skill sets and the appropriate work ethic, and put it all in one lower cost location. So I haven't really seen people doing it yet, but I think we're going to have to over time.
Yeah, for us, things are a little different. And Sue, I'm not apologize. I apologize. I don't know the sort of the size of your GBS now or in future, but for us, it is location strategy is more of an outcome thing. For me, the most important consideration is, am I getting the right skills for the value I need to deliver? One. The second big ticket decision item for us is, I want my GBSs only where Diageo business also has a big presence in that market. You need to be known as a brand in the market to attract the right talent.
Okay. No, I think
that's a very important consideration.
And you not only need to be a brand, you need to be a brand that folks understand in that
exactly
market.
So you need to be known.
If you're a CPG company and you're not selling something in a market, it's going to be very hard to get people to.
You're not going to get the best talent. You're not going to get the best talent, especially in a captive model. At our size, we are a very small company. For 20 billion, we are just 30,000 people in the whole company, and GBS is like what, 2,400, which is 8% of the company headcount. But it is still small. If I don't have the brand advantage, I will never get the best talent. People will not come to a 2,000-person setup to build a GBS career.
So locating a center in a country where drinking alcohol is not
our location strategy, and in fact real estate strategy also, Deborah. Even our real estate strategy, we are saying co-locate the business and the GBS in that country. They need to be part of the same leadership and team and meet each other at lunch. That's how you build value. That's how you build the culture.
We have another question from the audience. We did have a cheeky question: aren't we seeing more location in Fiji and Jamaica? But certainly, we've got a lot of economic development organizations who are pushing some of these great exotic locations. I think one of the things we've seen is that the critical mass of talent just isn't there. It's great to go to Fiji, but if you can't get 300 accountants, it's a bit of a challenge.
I can share, Deborah, that we have seen some movements in Jamaica. Fiji, I would love to. In fact, I would do an explore if it's a good location and recommend others. But yeah, Jamaica, we have definitely seen for customer, care work special.
We have one more question and then we'll close. How do you get, it's a perennial question. How do you get your leaders to adopt the GBS model? Please put it through the lens of CPG retail.
I mean, at our end, that door has to open from the inside. We don't push. The value and the numbers have to speak for itself, and the adoption will happen.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, we're starting with an organization that knows the value, but you have to prove the value, right?
Well, intellectually, we all know the value. I mean,
some leaders, I don't know.
Some
leaders that I've worked with, I'm not sure I'd agree with that. But it's really proving yourself, proving the organization, and proving you can do what you're set out there to do. And once you've shown that, I found people are more coming to you, exactly like he was talking about.
Well, I think it's even beyond proving what you can do, making sure the experience, how they experience a GBS operation, is very critical. And I think that's for another discussion. Let me close by asking the $10 million question. What should CPG and retail organizations, GBS organizations, do now to ensure that they're agile in the face of unprecedented geopolitical change? I stopped reading news because it's can be quite distressing at some time. Inflation, we're waiting today to see what the Fed does with rates. Climate change, which affects CPG companies particularly. I mean, if we have a huge change in climate, those agave farmers, Puneet, their yields are going to change. What should our audience do differently now?
For me, it is very simple. The speed of the design and delivery of your solutions to the business must match up with the speed at which the business is moving. If you do that, you will have a seat at the table. They will see you as a partner because you can help them with the challenges they're facing. That's the biggest matchup we need to do, I think. And we have a long ways to go. Some services are there, some operations are there, some processes and capabilities are there, others are still not there.
Sue?
No, I would agree. You have to be that valued advisor. You have to be that person who listens, understands what the business needs, and is actually delivering those things. If you take your eyes off the business for a minute, then they're not going to want you back at the table.
Good sage advice to those in the audience. Rohit, I'd like to thank both of you for taking time. I've never seen GBS leaders so busy as they are now, and with year end and new strategies, and in your case, Sue, standing up at GBS. Thank you both for taking the time today. Rohit, back to you.
Hey, thanks, Deborah, and thanks to all three of you and Shivi. It has been a very engaging discussion. A couple of quick call-outs before we wrap up. One, for those who are joining, who joined a bit late and are still catching up with the discussion, do use the chat to post your questions to us and to our panelists. We can offline take some of that. There are a couple of questions we could not take. We'll respond to you in the chat. Second, the report that was mentioned during the initial part, you can use the link in the chat to request for a copy of that report. In fact, towards the end, a great point on GBS brand was discussed, and we have done some dedicated research on that. We analyzed the brand pool of about 300 leading GBS organizations in top 3 markets, India, Philippines, Poland. Some great insights from there. So for those interested in that topic, do reach out to us as well. And lastly, just using this opportunity to announce that we are bringing together a very selected group of global GBS leaders together from the CPG community. We believe conversations like this, really help, and an exchange in a broader community will be very valuable. So I wanted to use this platform to announce this community as well. We're really excited about the first group meeting later this month. And with that, once again, thank you to the panel for making time for this. And thank you for our listeners for staying with us till now. And have a good day.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.